the definition of brutality and the king of rock-solid chins. Gennady Triple G Golovkin is one of the hardest, most vicious champions we've ever seen inside a boxing ring. Now, if you saw him on the street, you wouldn't be blamed for mistaking him as a fella who's never had a fight before. He just doesn't exactly look as scary as he really is. But make no mistake, in his prime, Golovkin was like a reincarnation of a middleweight Rocky Marciano, knocking out people for fun and marching forward with no care in the world for what would be returned. Now, taking us back, Triple G would make his appearance into the world on the 8th of April 1982. He was born in Karaganda, Kazakhstan, and has two elder brothers along with a twin brother called Maxim. At the time, life was rough and tough for the Golovkin family, and they would live a modest, humble life in what was then the later days of the Soviet Union, and it was his brothers who would actually mould him and shape him into a world of violence. He would actually walk the streets of Karaganda, and they would pick fights for him with literal grown men almost every day. And when they asked him, "Are you afraid?" he would just respond with a simple no. If that doesn't sum up the Golovkin that we've all come to know and love, then I don't know what does. Around a year or so after he started boxing, his two older brothers went off and joined the Soviet army, but tragically, both men passed away during their time serving. It shattered the family, and Golovkin learned a very painful but meaningful lesson early on, that life is never promised. And in their honour, he would then stay true to his ambitions in boxing and knuckle up, believe in his potential, and take the sport very seriously. So after being in the gym for the best part of 3 years, he began boxing competitively, and after losing his very first fight, Golovkin went on through the levels and tested himself against the very best in the world. At the 2003 World Amateur Boxing Championships in Thailand, Golovkin faced off against future two-time champion Matt Korobov and beat him with relative ease, scoring a knockdown along the way. The one they called Triple G had now won his first gold medal, and with some confidence behind him, he was about to become a serious problem in the amateur game. After the win over Korobov, he then went on to rack up another 3 gold medals, 1 silver and 3 bronze during the next 2.5 years. The name Triple G was now well known, and with victories over some serious fighters alongside Korobov like Andy Lee and Lucien Bute, he was now ready to turn over and bow out the amateurs with an insane record of 345 wins to 5 losses. It was now onto the pro game and world domination. So he made his professional debut in Germany, where he would continue to box for the best part of his early career, and in usual Triple G fashion, he put on a clinic and stopped his man in less than 2 minutes, a sign of things to come for the Kazakhstani wrecking machine. Granted, whilst he was in Germany, he wasn't boxing the second coming of Mayweather or fighting guys with an amazing amateur background, but nevertheless, this is where he racked up the wins and started to hone his craft as a legitimate knockout artist. And after winning the vacant IBO belt inside a round against American middleweight Lajian Simon, Golovkin left Germany and began his voyage across the globe, looking to bring what he called the drama show to the rest of the world. So his first bout in America was against the tried and tested Gregor Proxa. Would he feel the flutter of boxing stateside for the first time? Maybe a showing of a few chinks in the armour against a guy that had only lost 1 fight in 29? Certainly not. He went on to absolutely cook the man from start to finish. Every shot in the book rained down on Proxa as he met the canvas in rounds 1 and 4 and was then finished off in the 5th. No nerves from Gennady, and no sign that he feared anyone or anything inside that squared circle. Then next up was a brutal display against Gabe Rosado, which was then followed on by a string of big performances against tough opposition. Legit fighters such as Matthew Macklin, Martin Murray and Willie Monroe Jr. all fell victim to the same Triple G dominating outcome. Now at this point, the Kazakhstani was treating hard, stubborn men like they were ragdolls and walking them down without a care in the world. No matter how hard they tried, he stalked and he pressured, threw dynamite and got every single one of them out of there, making it look fairly easy whilst doing it. And the world was certainly beginning to take notice. He would look to go up another gear and challenge David Lemieux for the IBF belt, and you guessed it, the bout ended in the same outcome as the rest. Golovkin bullied Lemieux, and by the 8th round the referee had seen enough and waved it off. However, in his next fight, Golovkin would take a leap into unknown territory inside the O2 Arena in London to face one of Britain's most talented fighters, Kell the Special One Brook. Although Kell competed at welterweight and it was a huge risk for him to step up, the Golovkin fight presented itself, and if Kell could deal with the size, then it would actually turn out to be quite an interesting matchup between an undefeated, skillful slick switch hitter who was a world champion in his own right against the hard-hitting destroyer from Kazakhstan. Kell came out sharp and was boxing Golovkin in the early stages, and every time he landed clean the crowd erupted. For a few split seconds it looked like Golovkin was at least a little dazed from some of the shots, but of course, ultimately he was just eating them up as usual. The success was short-lived for Brook as Golovkin started to turn the screw. Two of the judges had it level heading into the 5th round, but like the 34 of his previous 35 fights, the judges wouldn't be needed in this one either, as Golovkin chopped him down and Brook's corner had no choice but to throw the towel in. Another brutal statement victory for Gennady, and maybe the best performance of his career up until then. So 6 months after he'd done the job in Britain, Golovkin returned back to Madison Square Gardens, where he took on a crafty, classy contestant in Danny Jacobs. Surprisingly, for the first time in 9 years, he went the full 12 with Jacobs and had some serious problems with his slippery style early on. However, ultimately he defended his unified crown and won via unanimous decision. Two judges scored it 115 to 112, whilst the other gave it to Golovkin by a single round. Now, it was strange not to see Golovkin dispatch of Jacobs inside 12 after the run he'd been on. Had he peaked? Did Jacobs give an insight into the blueprint on how to beat Golovkin? Well, the doubters came back in full force, and Triple G found himself wanting to cement his name yet again as the hardest, toughest, most dangerous man in the middleweight division. And there was a special somebody who was willing to oblige him, Canelo Alvarez. Now this was the definition of a mouth-watering fight, not only because both were at the very top of their game, but because we couldn't see any way that either man would give an inch to the other. Both liked to come forward, both were resilient, and both liked to stand in the pocket and throw bombs. Then in Las Vegas on the 16th of September 2017, that's exactly what they did. The fight was as interesting as predicted, action-packed from start to finish. Neither man went down, nor did they show any sign of giving in. However, the Mexican-style Canelo promised didn't quite come to fruition on the night, finding himself on the back foot more often than not, and when the final bell rang, many felt Triple G had done enough to take the fight based on his fierce aggression and output. But famously, the scorecards were as confusing as ever, with one judge, Adelaide Bird, having it as wide as 118-110 to Canelo. It was almost a shame to see the fight end in a draw, but then again, knowing that it would be run back because of this certainly wasn't bad news. Unfortunately, not too long after, a failed drug test by Canelo led to the rematch getting pushed back, but after serving a short ban, Canelo was ready to go again, and the pair were set to give us a generational fight at the same arena they had fought in a year before. So, this time everyone knew what to expect, and of course both men produced that Mexican style fight that we were originally promised. Canelo showed his class and closed the gap that he left from the first fights to go on and earn the win. Some may call this controversial, some may vehemently disagree, but either way it was just one of them fights that could have gone either way. Regardless, Triple G had now suffered his first loss. Now of course he was never the type to cry over spilt milk, so he stepped back in the ring 9 months later. He hadn't tasted a stoppage in nearly a year, but his appetite was soon satisfied with an all too familiar KO over Steve Rolls. He then collected victories over Derevyanchenko, Zerameta and Murata in Japan. Golovkin was still Golovkin, but in the fights after the rematch with Canelo, sadly it seemed like age was beginning to catch up with him, just a little bit. Yet still, in typical fashion, and because the man shies away from nobody, he would jump back in with one of the most talented fighters of the generation. The Canelo trilogy made sense, and it made history. It would go down as one of the most famous trilogies the sport has ever seen. However, this time the younger, fresher Canelo proved to be just too much. This performance would be a lot more convincing than the last, and unfortunately the fears of every Triple G fan looked like they were now becoming a reality. This Golovkin we see is still dangerous, he's still fearless, but he is not the Golovkin of old. So up to present day, and how much has the great Triple G got left, if anything? The boxing world would love to see him back in action in some big fights, but the dilemma of having a couple more than you should or hanging up the gloves too early is an age-old question that he and only he can answer. He has never been stopped and probably never will be. He hasn't taken any long-term damage in any of his fights, and it feels like he definitely has more in the gas tank. But the man looks to be content from what we see of him these days, and his passion now seems to be behind the scenes doing great stuff for the sport. Whatever happens, whatever he does, whether returning to the ring or not, his legacy in boxing is solidified, and he will go down as one of the greatest middleweights the division has ever seen.